Does it matter what our houses look like? Can a building make us happy? What might a perfect home of today be like? Caring a lot about the design and decoration of our houses can seem both materialistic and self-indulgent. But this series argues that the dilemmas of the ordinary homeowner straddle a range of the most profound questions of the branch of philosophy known as aesthetics. The choices we make about the shape of the windows or the colour of the walls matter, because we are, for better and for worse, different people in the different places we inhabit. In this programme, I want to question the appearance of many new housing developments. Are the houses currently being built as well designed or even as beautiful as they could be? According to government figures, 1 million new homes are going to have to be built over the next 10 years in Britain alone. A dramatic projection of growth echoed right across the developed world. It's a challenge, as important in its way as improving hospitals or schools. What vision of life and happiness should our new houses be proposing? This field, just outside Stratford-upon-Avon, is threatened by a proposed development of 700 new homes. Local campaigner Gordon Brace is deeply pessimistic about what's going to be built here.
How do you personally feel that this is going to come under the bulldozers?
Well, I think all the people who live here feel as all people always do when beauty is threatened. We feel fed up and very cross, and personally very angry.
There's more to Gordon's protest than a desire to save his view. His objection to the development is focused on the quality of its design. Why has the prospect of new houses come to seem like a curse rather than an opportunity?
What do you think is particularly wrong with these houses?
I think that the design is totally anonymous. The houses like this come off a computer model and they will be duplicated at any town you like to go to. It's just masses of these little houses. And then we're surprised that people retire into their own boxes, take no notice of their neighbours, don't form a community, don't go and vote, don't feel part of anything else, because we've forced them into a situation where all they can do is to go home and look at the telly.
I don't dispute the need to build the houses. I'm interested in the impact of this kind of architecture on what I might as well call our souls. The most striking feature of the houses we're building today is that most of them don't look very modern. We seem passionately interested in reviving old styles, Neo-Georgian, Neo-Tudor, Neo-Rocky Mountain style, anything but the style of our own era. We want to recreate the feel of life about 250 years ago, before the Industrial Revolution, in a simpler, more agricultural age. Great Notley Garden Village outside Braintree, Essex, is a development of 2,000 new homes completed in 2003. Its developer, Chris Crook, showed me round.
Chris, if a Martian came to this village, there would be no way of them knowing that they were in the 21st century. They might think they were in 1750. There's nothing that says we are living today rather than 200 years ago.
You would know something about the age because of
this SUV.
Yeah, you've got a double garage integral to the design.
My main objection is that I think that houses should in some way reflect the age in which we live. I mean, as you know, the interior of this house is very different to the exterior. The interior will be modern, it will be full of computer equipment, it will be cutting edge. The exterior will be harking back to something which no longer exists.
Not at all. I mean, it's, if that's what people want, we're in the industry of producing what people want.
Property developers are often criticised for being greedy, but to blame their financial aspirations is to miss the point. as a visit to the elegant squares of Georgian London makes clear.
Up until the 1760s, this part of London was all just farmland. But that's when a speculative property developer by the name of the Earl of Bedford decided that he would construct one of the great classical squares of the world on this very spot. And I think he succeeded quite well. The Earl took a keen interest in every aspect of the buildings that he designed. He made stipulations as to the colour of the doors, the width of the windows, the heights of the houses. It was even said that he could be seen on a Sunday morning trimming the hedges to ensure a perfect classical sense of symmetry.
I'm not saying that we should be copying the architectural style of Bedford Square today, quite the opposite. But the level of artistic ambition of its developer and the architectural boldness of his designs would be something to emulate.
The real lesson of Bedford Square is that there doesn't have to be a conflict between creating something that's beautiful and something that will make money.
I want to criticise many new developments, neither for their very existence nor for their commercial aspirations, but because of their style. The kind of architecture they employ has been called pastiche. That is, an unconvincing reproduction of the styles of the past. There's nothing wrong with wanting our houses to be in touch with the traditions of our country. It's how we do it that counts. So what's the problem with a pastiche way of doing things? Come with me to a few interesting places around the world and you'll see. For anyone interested in architecture, I recommend a visit to this fascinating town. Stay at the magnificent Hotel de l'Europe with its stunning views over the canals. Take a relaxing trip in a traditional Amsterdam glass-topped boat. Soak up the atmosphere of the historic Market Square with its wonderful Dutch cheese shops and its medieval guild hall. And if you like that kind of thing, there are windmills. It's a beautiful place, a magnificent piece of urban planning and a model of ecological sustainability. So why is it that as soon as I got here, I started to feel uneasy, even nauseous?
The reason I'm feeling a little bit strange is that, despite appearances, I'm not in fact in the Netherlands. I'm in Japan, just near the southern city of Nagasaki.
This is Huis ten Bosch, an entire fake Dutch town, which allows the Japanese to experience the charms of the pre-20th century Netherlands without any of the inconvenience of actually having to go there. It's a meticulous recreation. The very wood and bricks have been imported from Holland. But the place is all the eerier for its historical exactitude. The lesson of this strange Japanese town is that a good building needs to be more than just structurally sound. Its appearance must also in some way cohere with both its place and its time.
Huis ten Bosch Dutch Village may be an extreme example of pastiche architecture, but here in Great Notley Village, you get some of the same eerie, unnerving quality. The buildings may be more recognisably in the right country, but they're certainly not of the right era. Which begs the question, why are we so interested in building in the styles of a pre-industrial age?
In the grounds of the Palace of Versailles stands a strange little village called the Queen's Hamlet, built in 1776 under the direction of Marie Antoinette, Queen of France. Worn down by the formality and grandeur of life at Versailles, Marie Antoinette used to escape here to watch cows being milked and to perform in little plays about the lives of milkmaids and peasants. It's another eerie place, a fantasy stage set for a woman who clearly didn't have the faintest idea of what peasant life was actually like. And yet it's the forerunner of every neo-vernacular housing estate in the Western world.
Marie Antoinette's reasons for liking this kind of peasant architecture are simple enough to read. Basically, she'd had enough of luxurious palace life, of mirrors, gold, marble and long state dinners, and she was looking to rustic architecture to help her to rebalance her character, to put her in touch with sides of her personality she was afraid of losing touch with. And in a way, nowadays in the modern Western world, we've all followed in the footsteps of Marie Antoinette. The general trend towards the rustic, towards a kind of fake country living, reflects the fact that we are in fact very far away from this kind of country life. We're looking to rustic architecture precisely because we're so very unrustic in our souls.
One can sympathise with Marie Antoinette's problems with the Palace of Versailles. It is oppressively ornate and formal. A few hours there does make you long for something simpler. And yet, wandering around the Queen's Hamlet today, you sense that it's not Marie Antoinette's complaints with the world around her that were misguided. It's how she responded to them. The problem is that she fell for a delusion. It's not just that most peasants lived in grinding misery and often longed to escape their scenic villages. It's that rather than grappling with reality, rather than trying to reform French upper-class life to make it less decadent and ornate, she fled from it. Rather than trying to make the real world properly habitable, she ran away to a make-believe home, while the reality just got worse and worse, till a revolutionary mob came to bash down the gilded doors of Versailles and dragged her off to the guillotine. We seem in danger of responding to many of the problems of modern reality with the same lack of sophistication and courage as Marie Antoinette. The danger in our reality comes from a very different direction. Our world seems too brutal, too technological, too industrial. We see an ugly landscape taking shape of trading estates, factories and shopping malls, and the prospect frightens us.
In the early 20th century, a German philosopher and art historian by the name of Wilhelm Worringer came up with a fascinating thesis for why it is that certain societies and individuals will fall in love with certain kinds of architecture. His premise was that we fall in love in architecture with what we don't have enough of in ourselves. So the rustic style, infused as it is with the qualities of quaintness and simplicity, will appeal chiefly to societies where progress has been too fast, where there's an atmosphere of moral and spiritual confusion, and so a hungering for old certainties. Against such a turbulent background, inhabitants will experience what Worringer termed an immense longing for tranquility, and so will turn to country cottages to regain a peace of mind.
Dorian Bowen works in a large firm of surveyors in central London. Every weekend, he drives for 4.5 hours into rural Carmarthenshire and lives in a caravan while he lovingly restores a rustic cottage.
Now, your dream for the cottage is to bring it back as faithfully as possible to how it must have been in its heyday. I mean, that's the goal.
Yes, to be as authentic as one practically can be and faithful to the period, as it were. This would have been the heart of the house, really. Everything was done around the fire. I mean, as you can see, even the furniture actually goes inside the fireplace itself.
So you stay as close to the warmth.
Yes, and all the cooking and everything was done in the fire. And of course, the last little feature was the pigsty. This has been converted into the outside toilet.
So you're converting it, but not into an ensuite.
No, it's completely outside.
So people will have to go outside of the house in winter, say, to go to the loo.
Yes.
As Worringer would have pointed out, it takes a deeply urban person to feel the attraction of living in an 18th century cottage. Like Marie Antoinette, we long for a simpler, more authentic life, longings that we think a country cottage will assuage.
So, Dorian, how do you imagine your life once work in the cottage is done and everything is set up? How will you spend your days here?
Sure, exactly.
Have you not thought about that?
Yeah. Look for another project, maybe.
I recommend it to anybody that they have a house full of bears. They'll never be miserable.
Voringer's ideas apply as much to how we do up the interiors of our houses as to their outward design. We're drawn to a style of decor because it seems to contain qualities in which we're deficient. So a given stylistic choice will tell us as much about what its advocates lack in their lives as what they like on their walls. The harsher and more frightening we perceive the modern world to be, the more we might want our houses to speak of softness and coziness.
They have a bear.
Susan French started collecting teddy bears as a girl.
His name's Bob.
Old Bob.
Old Bob.
She and her late husband built up a collection that now numbers 800.
So the bears are a comfort?
Oh, yes, definitely. But they always were in childhood. You know, when you come home from school and life was a bit... You got your bear and everything was OK.
Yeah. Why do you think people stop sort of hugging their bears? Because it's...
Probably because they don't feel very grown up, but I don't care.
Yeah.
I think people are often sort of care about what other people think, and I never have.
Why do you feel a strong need for that kind of coziness and comfort?
I don't know, all my life I've liked to be cosy and comfortable, and my mum and dad were very loving, and we always had a lovely, cosy, happy house, and I guess I wanted to recreate that and pass it on.
What's the opposite of cosy for you when it comes to a house or a space or an atmosphere?
Minimalism.
That's the opposite of cosy.
Bare floorboards, one television in the corner, and a couple of leather chairs.
And that's...
Very smart, and sometimes I think, oh, it'd be lovely to have this, and then I think, oh no, I couldn't live like that.
There's nothing wrong with wanting our homes to give us comfort and security. It's how we go about it that counts. Surely the best way to deal with what we don't like about the modern world isn't to pretend that that world never happened.
If we're saying that the rustic style of architecture is all about getting us to forget reality, we could say, well, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with a little delusion? Any attack on delusion probably comes back to the idea that escaping the facts always has a price that you have to pay for doing so. The German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche talked about a mature adult always being someone who no longer denies, who looks at the truth in the face.
Nietzsche said, "The worst sickness of men tends to originate in the sentimental way they try to combat their sicknesses. What seems like an easy cure, in the long run produces something worse than what it's supposed to overcome. Fake consolations always have to be paid for with a general and profound worsening of the original complaint."
So how does Nietzsche's thought apply to architecture? Really, the idea is that a good building shouldn't be shutting itself off from reality. It should be in some way mediating between the inner world and the outer world as it actually is. The point of our buildings is to reconcile us to the facts of our lives.
By refusing to grapple at an architectural level with the challenges of modernity, its technology, its speed, its titanic energies, we're letting the modern world become progressively uglier. We're creating a landscape divided on the one hand between uninspiring and brutal industrial and commercial zones, and on the other, sentimental, pastiche dormitory villages. We're ducking the challenge of making something beautiful out of the stuff of our modern reality. So does that mean that we should all be living in houses that look a little bit like industrial sheds or factories? Of course not. I think it's quite possible for houses to look modern, to look distinctively contemporary, but to talk about the best sides of the modern world. Our houses should present us with a modern ideal. It's this belief that took me to Berlin, the new capital of a united Germany. A city which is trying to use its many new buildings in the way I think they should be used, to inspire its citizens with a modern, achievable vision of what they could ideally become. Why are there so many statues of angels and lions and men on horseback on the roofs of old buildings? So many allegories painted on the ceilings and high-minded slogans carved on the walls. It's all a bit unfashionable nowadays, but it's worth just thinking for a moment about why their architects thought it worth putting them there. I've come to Berlin to see how modern architecture might inspire us with ideals. It's a notion with deep roots in German culture. It was here in the late 18th and early 19th centuries that a group of artists and writers worked out a philosophy of architecture which they called idealization. Idealization was what motivated the man who built Berlin's grandest buildings in the 1820s and 30s, Carl Friedrich Schinkel. Schinkel wanted to endow Berlin with some of the qualities of ancient Athens. His bridges, museums and palaces aimed to inspire his fellow Berliners with the ideals he thought were important about classical Greece: aristocratic self-confidence, discipline, courage and self-restraint. Schinkel wasn't stupid. He knew that Prussians were seldom as noble and heroic as the figures he placed on their buildings. But he believed that architecture should nevertheless show them what to aspire to.
As Berliners crossed the Schlossbrücke to get to a meeting or went to the theatre in the evening, the hope was that architecture could, in a small but significant way, help to lift their spirits and unlock their bridled potential.
This might all seem some distance away from our own more cynical age. It's impossible to overlook just how far short many Germans fell of the high-minded ideals inscribed in their buildings. But it would be a mistake to dismiss altogether the notion that buildings can inspire us with ideals. And modern Berlin provides a unique demonstration of why.
We haven't really lost sight of the whole project of idealization in architecture. We still have ideals, but these are quite different ideals. We're interested in things like democracy, science, and business. And these things still play a large part in the kinds of buildings that we build. Behind a practical facade, modern architecture has never lost sight of the idea of trying to reflect back to its audience a selective and perhaps quite flattering image of who it is, in the hope of moulding upon and improving reality.
The idea that a building should try to make us better people has implications for everything we build, including our houses. But it's perhaps easiest to accept where major public buildings are concerned. Take the refurbishment of the German Parliament, the Reichstag. It's as full of idealizing ambition as any of Schinkel's palaces ever were. This building, burnt down by the Nazis, left as a ruin since then, was thought by many people to be too tainted by the German past ever to be used again. But the British architect Norman Foster, by scooping out the structure and crowning it with a dazzling dome, has reinvented it. Lord Foster makes no bones about his philosophical ambitions.
The Reichstag is creating a symbol which is about a public space, and it is using the lightness and the transparency to signal, if you like, symbolically, the process of democracy. So in that sense, it's become a symbol, not only of Berlin, but of a reunified Germany. But that transparency, that lightness, also creates a new relationship between the body politic and the public. that's also needed a lot of courage, if you like, on the part of the politicians to accept that symbolically the public that they serve are literally above them and looking down on them.
The buildings produced under an idealizing theory of architecture might be described as a subtle form of propaganda. The word's a rather alarming one, but perhaps it shouldn't be. There's nothing wrong with the idea that works of art, and in particular architecture, should direct our actions in some way, so long as the directions it points us in are valuable ones. The defenders of idealized architecture are refreshing in the frank way in which they insisted that actually art should make things happen, and in particular, that our buildings should try to make us good.
It's not just the Germans who've had to think about how modern architecture might speak of ideals. With the relocation of the capital of Germany to Berlin in 1990, almost every country in the world has been obliged to build a new embassy here. The point of an embassy is that it's a building that should speak about a country, what its values are, what it ideally stands for.
This is the Dutch embassy, reflecting some of the virtues and aspirations of this country, relentlessly modern but also quite playful. This is the home of the United Arab Emirates. Yes, this looks like an oriental Shahrazad's palace. So this is the Berlin home of the Swiss. Is this a bank? Is it an embassy? Hard to say. Now, this totalitarian bunker perhaps says more about the country that sponsored it than the architects originally intended. This is the Berlin home of the People's Republic of China. The British Embassy seems very aware of its country's potentially rather staid, dour image, and so seems to have taken a lot of pain to try and suggest a more fun and frivolous image, but it doesn't quite convince. It gives off the air of an accountant at a teenage disco, taking off his tie and getting on the dance floor.
An embassy is an unusually clear example of what all architecture should be trying to do, saying what's valuable about a culture. But it's important not to be too literal or too obvious. That's when you get a pastiche.
We thought that we should send a subtle message to the Berliners that, yes, here is Egypt. And you can see that anybody...
This is the subtle message.
Yeah.
The Egyptian embassy makes the same mistake as the neo-vernacular housing estates we visited in Britain. Yes, it's speaking about Egypt, but in the most cliched of ways. It's reduced Egyptianness to the level of a mural on a wall.
President Mubarak, and we should have this official picture.
It's a carpet, isn't it?
It is a carpet, yes, it is a carpet, yeah.
This building may nod towards the traditions of Egypt, but without showing how those traditions have anything to do with Egypt today. It's a classic example of a building Nietzsche would have called sentimental.
So this is sort of an Egyptian princess getting ready for a party.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Compare that with the joint outpost of the Scandinavian countries in Berlin. 5 beautifully tooled national pavilions grouped around a common courtyard. What I admire here is that it really has summed up some good things about the region, but in a modern, subtle, unsentimental way. These buildings are an understated celebration of classic Scandinavian ideals: openness, cooperation, democracy, and the harmonious coexistence of sleek modern technology with the rough-hewn materials of the ancient fjords, mountains and forests.
This is Finland, then Sweden, Norway, Iceland, Denmark.
So what's this building trying to tell us about Finland?
I wondered myself, but I think what it is telling is high-tech functionality and a certain economy in not overdoing it. I mean, this is the only color spot we have, and the contrast, although I say it myself, is not bad. And the secret of the Finnish embassy is behind our backs, and that's, of course, the sauna.
This is the sauna?
This is a sauna.
It's really a sauna, or it looks like a meeting room? Oh my God, it really is a sauna.
It is a sauna.
That's fantastic. So you resolve some of the big diplomatic issues that arise in the sauna.
You couldn't imagine a Finnish embassy without a sauna.
I agree.
And you can imagine that all the others envy us for this. This is the Danish embassy. This is one of my favorites here. It is spectacular in a different way. What I like here is, of course, the light wood and the clarity also. I mean, you have the whole embassy in one. You have these lifts. Denmark is designed. They are the smartest businessmen in Scandinavia.
For me, the lesson of this building is that today's architecture can speak of the ideals of the age every bit as powerfully as the statue-covered museums of old Berlin once did. I think that's what domestic buildings could do too. So what contemporary ideals should our own houses be speaking of? And what might they look like if they did? I've been arguing that our buildings should reflect the best of our era and our country.
Is it tempting as you fly over all this, you think, oh, I could change that bit, and what about just removing that thing and putting something else? Must be an architect's temptation.
Yes, you do see a bigger picture, certainly.
So what is it about the modern world that architects should be celebrating? Norman Foster took me for a jaunt in his helicopter.
And do you think it really has influenced your architecture to be able to have that added aerial perspective, this understanding of air?
I think the aerial perspective is important. If you look at a building like Swiss Re, it's using the same principles that sustain flight.
But I wondered whether it's quite so easy to find the modern world exciting when you can't fly effortlessly over it.
What would you say to people who were frightened by modernity? I mean, here in a way we're seeing the most exciting aspect of modernity, but it could also be seen as sort of frightening to be up in this little glass box floating above London. I mean, I'm personally thrilled, and probably you are too, but some people are not. What do you say to them?
I think there are more people who are excited than those who are not.
There's an argument for saying that though some people remain very excited by technology and its promise, etc., public taste, when it comes to especially domestic housing, lags behind that excitement. People are very happy to have a new computer and a new car and a modern-looking oven. But when it comes to the actual shape and design of their house, there's a tremendous nostalgia.
Is it because that is the dominant model and everybody wants it, or is it because there isn't a better alternative? The indications are that when they're in charge, whether they're, that big or whatever,
that actually the promises of modernity live on if they're given a chance.
You see, if you were going to Bath at the time that they were created, that was the rejection of the past model of housing. It wasn't going to something that is now cosy and mellow.
It was high-tech. Bath was high-tech in its day.
All of these, at their time, they were radical. But you see, you can never at any point in the history of building take away technology. Technology is implicit, embedded, endemic. It's central to the creation of the kind of spaces that we're talking about.
Lord Foster's vision of a public thrilled by technology and progress has largely triumphed where big public or civic buildings are concerned. Think of Tate Modern or his own magnificent Gherkin, Swiss Re. But on the level of the domestic house, there's still a long way to go. So what are the modern ideals that we could be celebrating in our homes?
What I always loved about this was the concrete. Swiss concrete is this most amazing invention. They put wood slats in front of it and it leaves the imprint of the wood. It's an extremely sort of sensual texture. I remember running my hands along this as a child constantly. And it's got this great smell as well, concretey smell. For me, that's a very Proustian smell. Brings back my whole childhood.
I went back to the home where I grew up, a rented flat in a 1960s block in the Swiss city of Zurich.
Now, I have not been in this space since I was 12, but I remember it absolutely. It's lovely to have this kind of central atrium, so light-filled. These huge windows. I seem to remember lots of things about you're not allowed to touch the glass, because I'd leave my little handprints all over the place. Now look at this, it's a fantastic, raw, concrete chimney breast. Tremendously bold when you think that they were building this. This place was built in '66. So this was a real vision of how people should live sort of as modern citizens. Incredibly light and airy, fantastic view. And it's very touching, really, because this is sort of sums up the ideals of what modern architecture was all supposed to be about. Open plan living, a kind of very free-flowing spirit, incredibly in touch with nature. To me, this house still feels very modern. Most of the houses in Britain are probably about 20 years behind this, if not a century behind it. I actually remember that one of the great tragic things for me about coming to live in Britain, which I did when I was 12, was the windows. I grew absolutely obsessed by the windows, because look at these windows. They're fabulous, huge, chunky things. They shut like a submarine. I remember doing this as a child. So you're inside, you can sit here, and yet you can be outside as well. And this is really what modernism was all about. It was about living in the city, but with a garden. It was about living inside, but having contact with the outside. And it was about everything that a huge window symbolises, openness, really, and a kind of freedom. So this house was a very friendly house. It spoke to me of all the things that I'm still nostalgic for, and that I still think that a lot of houses being built today don't speak of enough. For me, growing up in a house like this really made me familiar with the values of a kind of heroic age of modern architecture, and the ideas of speed, light, technology, all the most exciting things about living in the 20th century are sort of written into this building.
There are signs that some of the ideals of modern architecture are finding acceptance, even by the conservative British. Carol Coombs and John Brooke used to live in a Victorian terrace in Ealing. Now they've built a modern house at the bottom of their garden, and they live there instead.
The ironical thing is that we actually bought this piece of land that our house now stands on, mainly to prevent anybody else from building a horrid modern house.
And then you've ended up building a beautiful
but that
one.
was a whole story.
We just presume, because this is a conservation area, that we'd have to build what there is on the other side of the road, which would have been fine.
You never really imagined it would be possible?
No, no. And then suddenly the architect started to say, well, you know, I really don't think we're very constrained here. You can do more or less what you like. We'll give it a go.
So in many ways, this house sort of breaks the rules, doesn't it, of the traditional house?
The first thing that breaks the rules, of course, is the glass roof here of the atrium. And that's because this is that's south. So from an architect's point of view, it's very logical to make that glass, to let in the sun. And indeed, if it was a sunny day, the sun would be going onto our dining room table.
Has it changed you as people living in this house?
Yes. Seeing the sky on all sides, it invites you to look out. And I think maybe I've always been, would you say, a fairly introvert
Yeah, I think
person?
so. Quite, yes, I think so.
And I think it helps to make you realise that the purpose of a house is not a little sort of box in which you contain yourself, but actually what's important about it is the life you lead from your house. And so it seems to me anyway, to have focused my mind less on things, but more on what I actually do, what I actually feel.
What inspires me about Carol and John's house is that something as simple as opening the building out to light and space could have had such a large effect, not just on their views of the garden, but on their view of life.
So down the end here.
So this is where you spend most of your time living?
Yes.
A fantastic frame here.
Lovely view.
What does an appropriate house do for the people who live in it? How does it affect them?
I think it makes them able and enjoy change. That change is something that's exciting and not something a bit scary.
We're quite frightened of change in this country. I mean, we quite like that.
Yes.
We don't really like it. We're a bit frightened of this.
People said to us when we were doing it, "Oh my God, it was such a risk." And we'd never seen it as a risk, really. Well, I hadn't. I'd seen it as rather a great project, a great adventure. So I think I would say that it encourages you to do something different.
It's a cruel irony that just when we might feel ourselves most vulnerable to our surroundings, we often come into contact with some of the harshest and bleakest architecture.
The huge long corridors in hospitals, for me, are personally quite a scary experience.
You feel quite disorientated. You're not really sure where you are.
But even in this most utilitarian of spheres, hospital design, there are encouraging signs that the benefits of good modern architecture are beginning to be appreciated. Maggie's centres are a series of drop-in centres designed by some of the world's leading architects, which provide people diagnosed with cancer with a place for rest, support and reflection. This building, designed by the architect Frank Gehry, opened in 2003. It adjoins Dundee's main hospital.
The first time I came in here, I stopped and just, there was a calmness and a peace about this place that really helped me. And going upstairs to look out the window over the river, there was just a tranquility about the place that I felt helped me.
In this place you can wander inside and outside, and it's aesthetically pleasing. To me it's nice, it's relaxing, and if you do want to come to the place, I think it's helpful if you're coming to a place that's nice to be.
I always felt when I came in here that I just felt much calmer instantly, and I don't know if it was because it's light or if it was the view or if it was the fact that it was a lot of wood, which made me feel actually quite warm, and because it's quite natural, it made me feel like I could switch off in some ways.
I think that the structure of the building inside and out here, with the roundedness of many of the features like the walls and that table, the staircase that winds up, there are just very few jagged, sharp edges in here. You could embrace it. I often think of it as a lot more compactly round so that I could go in.
When I come in, I feel free, I feel alert, I feel confident, and I feel my mind is clearer, and my thought processes are better. I feel sort of intellectually better because I just there's something about the place that just makes me just know myself and be confident about thinking about things and stuff. So it's just a wonderful space. It's kind of freedom, it really is.
In the end, architecture can't make us into fundamentally different people, but what it can do is to be a permanent reminder of who we are at heart and want to be. What are future generations going to make of us if the vast majority of the buildings we produce are silent about or even scared by the reality of our 21st century lives? And if our buildings don't help us to mediate between the inner domestic sphere and the world outside our front doors, how are we going to make sense of ourselves? With 1 million new homes being planned over the next 10 years in Britain alone, the challenge we're facing is an urgent one. If we get it right, we could all have the opportunity to live in houses that help us to feel that the modern world might be somewhere to feel at home in. The idea that the design of our buildings really matters to our state of mind is in fact rather an alarming one, given how badly built most of our world is. How seriously should we allow ourselves to take questions of beauty and ugliness? In the next programme, I'll be meeting people who argue that the colour of the walls can literally change what you believe in. And I'll also try to tell you what's beautiful and why.